Okay, so I'll spend a bit of time now talking about the Australian economy. First thing I'd say is when you're looking at the Australian economy, ignore GDP. GDP is going to be fine. And the reason it's going to be fine is essentially the impact of mining exports. Essentially, in a very simple sense, Australia's had this massive investment in LNG, iron ore, mainly LNG, but they're now getting to the stage where instead of investing, we've now built the thing and it's going to be exported out. So if you looked at the last 12 months in GDP, it's about 3.25% on this time last year, of which the domestic part of the economy contributed about 1%. So what's sort of happening, and the big question is, in mining, they're no longer going to be investing. They've done their investment phase, they're going to come back, they're going to export it, but it means that the business part of the economy, or the local part of the economy, is going to be setting up to having a minus 20% business investment each year. So you've got this structural change that doesn't affect GDP, but does affect local economy. And if you think about it, one person to build an LNG platform, 19 people to build an LNG platform, one person to run it. That's the dynamic that we're looking about. So the big issue for the RBA is not about GDP, that's fine. The big issue is domestic demand and what can you do to help fill in the hole. To put a couple of extra comments to show you the history. Left-hand side there is mining investment as a percent of GDP. And it went from 1%, about 4 or 5 years ago, it got to 4%, today it's 8%. And as you go forward, it's going to go back down to about 4%. Everybody knows that's going to happen. That's a given, because you don't keep building Gorgon. Gorgon's a $60 billion project. You get it finished, that's it. On the right-hand side, just to give you a feel, there's no official data out there for miners who are actually what I might call not real miners, but they're building mines. The red is our best estimate of the number of people in mining who basically are not really miners, but they're builders of new mines. And if you look at what we're expecting to happen there, it's currently around 140,000 people. We're going to be losing 100,000 jobs, which is more than twice the entire motor vehicle industry. Not all of them will come out of the Australian economy. Some of them are 457 visas. Some of them are going to get jobs elsewhere, building apartments rather than building mines, etc. But that is a big headwind. And so that's the sort of dynamic that we're all looking at in terms of what's happening. Okay, so where are we now? Red line there is business confidence, which we do monthly. The red dotted line is sort of the long run average. So that sort of spike up around August, September last year was businesses' reaction to the change in government, which I've never seen before. We've been running these surveys for 30 years. Business clearly didn't like the last government and they've reacted like that. The blue line is not so much the animal spirits, but how did you actually go? And what you see is this sort of disconnect between business conditions and business confidence. So people are, in the business community anyway, they didn't worry about the budget. The consumer sentiment after the budget sort of crunched, it's coming back now, but business didn't. And so one of the issues for this is that the actual outcomes are still subpar. They're okay, but they're subpar. They're very mixed. If I take the last observation there and break it up by industry, this sort of results you get. So who's doing really well? The blue line is basically what we call recreation and personal services. In layman's terms, that's the consumer buying services. So if the consumer says, I need to go and see the doctor, I need to pay the utility bills, I'll do that. The other sector that's sort of starting to really roar in is over here, particularly in confidence. This is construction. And this is all about building apartments and also to some extent building houses, but it's also heavily driven by foreign money. Some of the other sectors that are sort of struggling, miners are having difficulty, particularly the small guys, because you're no longer investing in the mine, so you don't need the lawyer, you don't need the guy who's going to, you know, help build the mine. And the others tend to be mixed. Wholesale, discretionary retail confidence is better. Wholesale is not so good. We get worried about that because to us wholesale is a bit of a leading indicator. And if I look at those sort of lines and then I build, the red line here is basically a leading indicator, and our leading indicator sort of says we don't really believe things are even as good as what our survey is saying. It's saying it's going to get better, but it's saying it's going to be quite subdued, if I can put it that way. So a mixed sort of story, but the focus is all about domestic demand.